What if the kindest thing you ever did, the one secret you kept buried beneath tired feet and long hours, was about to change your life forever? For Amelia, a waitress in a forgotten town, kindness was a quiet language spoken in extra pancakes and full glasses of milk for a little boy who never said a word. She thought she was just feeding a hungry child. She had no idea she was protecting a $1 billion secret, and she never imagined that her simple act of compassion would bring the weight of the world, in the form of 4 black SUVs, right to the doorstep of the Harmony Creek Diner. Stay tuned, because this story is about to serve up a twist you'll never see coming. The bell above the door of the Harmony Creek Diner had a tired, tinny jingle. It was a sound as much a part of the place as the lingering scent of stale coffee and bacon grease that clung to the vinyl booths and checkered linoleum floors. For Amelia Rosewood, that jingle was the metronome of her life, counting out each customer, each meager tip, each exhausting 8-hour shift. At 28, her world had shrunk to the confines of this diner, a small universe smelling of bleach and fried onions, nestled in a town that time seemed to have forgotten. Harmony Creek wasn't harmonious, nor was it near a creek of any significance. It was a pit stop on a highway to somewhere more important, a place where dreams came to wither on the vine. Amelia's own dreams had been brighter once. She'd pictured a small bakery of her own, the air thick with the scent of yeast and sugar, her hands dusted with flour instead of smelling perpetually of dish soap. But a mountain of her late mother's medical bills and the stark reality of a world that didn't run on dreams had led her here, to this apron, this order pad, and the constant, weary ache in her feet. Her life was a repeating loop of lukewarm coffee before sunrise, the drive in her rattling Ford Festiva, and the faces of the same handful of regulars. There was old Mr. Abernathy, who read the same newspaper from 1998 every morning, the trio of construction workers who argued about football over heaps of scrambled eggs, and Brenda, the diner's manager, a woman whose smile was as thin and brittle as burnt toast. Brenda, a woman in her late 40s with a severe dark bob that looked sharp enough to cut glass, managed the diner with an iron fist and a perpetually suspicious glare. She watched the inventory like a hawk, counting sugar packets and weighing coffee grounds, convinced her staff was conspiring to bankrupt the establishment one stolen ketchup bottle at a time. Her favorite target was Amelia, whose quiet nature and occasional wistful stares out the window were, in Brenda's eyes, clear signs of a slacker. Rosewood, less dreaming, more cleaning, was Brenda's constant refrain, a verbal jab that always managed to find its mark. Amelia would just nod, her "Yes, Brenda," a soft murmur of compliance, and retreat into the methodical rhythm of her work. It was on a dreary Tuesday in late September that the boy first appeared. The bell jingled, but so faintly Amelia almost missed it. He slipped in like a shadow, a small, thin figure in clothes that were clean but hopelessly worn. His jeans were frayed at the cuffs and knees, and his gray hoodie was a size too big, swallowing his slender frame. He couldn't have been more than 10. He slid into the booth at the very back, booth 4, the one with the torn vinyl that no one liked, and became almost invisible. Amelia watched him from behind the counter. His hair was a messy mop of dark brown, falling over eyes that were fixed on the laminated menu, with an intensity that seemed too old for his face. He sat there for a full 10 minutes, tracing the descriptions with a small, dirt-smudged finger. Amelia knew the look. It was the careful calculus of hunger versus pocket change. Finally, she walked over, her pen and pad ready. "Hey there, hon. Know what you'd like?" she asked, her voice soft, practiced in the art of not spooking stray cats or shy children. He didn't look up. A small voice, barely a whisper, floated up from behind the menu. Just a glass of water, please." Amelia's heart gave a familiar, painful squeeze. She'd seen that kind of pride before, the fierce attempt to maintain dignity in the face of need. "Water it is," she said cheerfully. "And you know, we've got a special today. 2 pancakes for $1. Cook made too much batter." It was a lie, of course. There was no special. Brenda would have a fit if she knew. But the boy's head tilted up, and for the first time Amelia saw his eyes. They were a startling shade of blue, deep and intelligent, but clouded with a profound sadness that didn't belong on a child's face. He looked at her, then down at the tabletop, a silent negotiation happening within him. He pushed a small, crumpled dollar bill across the table. "Okay," he whispered. When Amelia brought the pancakes, she'd added a dollop of whipped cream and a small ramekin of strawberries she'd swiped from the walk-in fridge. She'd also accidentally poured a tall, cold glass of milk instead of water. "Oops, my mistake," she said with a wink. "Don't tell Brenda." For the first time, a flicker of something, a tiny ghost of a smile, touched the boy's lips. He ate with a slow, deliberate focus, as if savoring every single bite. He didn't say another word, but when he left, he placed his empty plate and glass neatly at the edge of the table and left the crumpled dollar bill. As he slipped out the door, he glanced back at her, a quick, fleeting look of gratitude that struck Amelia more deeply than any $100 tip. He came back the next day, and the day after that. The routine was always the same. He would slide into booth 4, order only what he could afford, sometimes just toast, sometimes a single egg, and Amelia would find a way to supplement it. An extra sausage link that had fallen onto the plate, a bowl of oatmeal that was about to be thrown out anyway, a piece of apple pie that had been cut wrong and couldn't be sold. It became their secret, a silent conspiracy of kindness conducted in the overlooked corner of a rundown diner. Amelia started looking forward to it, to that quiet half hour when the boy would appear. She learned to read his moods in the slight slump of his shoulders or the way he held his head. She started calling him Leo in her mind, after a lion-hearted character in a book her mother used to read to her. It suited him, she thought. He was quiet, but there was a strength, a resilience in his silent endurance. Brenda naturally noticed. "You're spending a lot of time with that kid in booth 4, Amelia," she said one afternoon, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed. "He barely orders anything. We're not a charity." "He's a paying customer, Brenda," Amelia replied calmly, her back to the manager as she wiped down the counter. Her heart was hammering. "He's a loiterer, and I see the mistakes you keep making with his orders. Don't think I don't. One more freebie, Rosewood, and it's coming out of your paycheck. Better yet, it might be your last paycheck." The threat hung in the air, thick and greasy as the diner's atmosphere. Amelia felt a surge of defiance mixed with fear. The money she earned was barely enough to cover her rent and the minimum payments on the soul-crushing debt. Losing even a few dollars was a blow. Losing her job would be a catastrophe. But then she pictured Leo's solemn face, the quiet gratitude in his eyes. She thought of him out there, alone, with nothing but a crumpled dollar to his name, and she knew she couldn't stop. She became more careful, a secret agent of nourishment. She'd drop a muffin into a takeaway bag as he was leaving. She'd distract Brenda at the front while the cook, a burly, soft-hearted man named Sal, who was in on the secret, slipped an extra burger patty onto Leo's plate. Sal, a father of 4, had a soft spot for kids and a deep-seated dislike for Brenda's miserly ways. "Kid needs to eat," he'd grumble, flipping a burger with more force than necessary. "She can dock my pay if she has the guts." The secret bound them, Amelia, Sal, and the silent boy in booth 4. It was a small rebellion, a pocket of warmth in the cold, uncaring routine of Harmony Creek. Amelia would find herself thinking about Leo even when she wasn't at the diner. Where did he go when he left? Where did he sleep? Did anyone ever read him a bedtime story or tuck him in at night? The questions swirled in her mind, unanswered, as she lay in her own small, lonely apartment, the silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. She'd started keeping a small notebook, jotting down expenses. Under her own tight budget, a new column had appeared. Leo's Fund. It was where she accounted for the dollars she spent on his specials, a tangible record of her quiet defiance. The fund was a constant reminder of the risk she was taking, but looking at it filled her not with regret, but with a strange, fierce sense of purpose. Autumn bled into early winter, and the wind that swept down the highway carried a bitter chill. The trees outside the Harmony Creek diner shed their last reluctant leaves, standing like skeletal sentinels against a perpetually gray sky. The arrival of the cold made Amelia's concern for Leo sharpen into a constant, painful ache. His hoodie seemed thinner than ever, a poor defense against the biting winds. Their routine had evolved. The silence between them was no longer empty, but filled with a comfortable, unspoken understanding. He would still slide into booth 4, but now his eyes would seek her out immediately, and a small, genuine smile would grace his lips when she approached. He started talking, just a little. His voice remained soft, but it lost some of its whispered, fearful quality. "Thank you for the pie, Amelia," he said one afternoon, after she'd brought him a generous slice of pumpkin pie a day after Thanksgiving. Hearing him say her name for the first time sent a jolt of warmth through her. "You are very welcome, Leo," she replied, using the name she had given him in her head without thinking. He didn't correct her. He just smiled again, a little wider this time. From then on, he was Leo, and she was Amelia. She learned small things about him, fragments of a puzzle she couldn't solve. He was incredibly observant. One day, Mr. Abernathy was struggling with the crossword puzzle from his ancient newspaper. A 7-letter word for a financial security representing ownership in a corporation, he grumbled aloud to no one in particular. From booth 4, Leo's quiet voice piped up. "Equity." Mr. Abernathy, Amelia, and even one of the construction workers looked over, surprised. Leo immediately shrank back, his face flushing, as if he regretted speaking. But Mr. Abernathy's face broke into a grin. "Well, I'll be. Equity. Fits perfectly. Smart kid." Amelia's curiosity deepened. Where did a 10-year-old boy, who looked like he hadn't seen the inside of a school in months, learn a word like equity? Another time, 2 businessmen, passing through town, were having a heated discussion in the booth next to Leo's. Their voices were loud, full of talk about hostile takeovers and leveraged buyouts. Amelia was refilling their coffees when she noticed Leo. He wasn't just listening, he was concentrating, his brow furrowed, his expression one of intense focus, as if he understood every word. He had a small, tattered notebook he sometimes carried, and she saw him discreetly jotting something down. The mystery of his origins was a constant presence. His backpack, a faded blue canvas affair, had a barely visible patch on it where a logo had been meticulously removed, but the ghost of the stitching remained. One day she got a closer look as he was shrugging it on. She could just make out the faint outline of a stylized S inside a circle. It meant nothing to her, but it felt like a clue. His speech, when he chose to use it, was another. It was surprisingly formal and articulate for a boy his age, free of the slang and casual cadence of other kids. It was as if he'd learned to speak by reading encyclopedias. Amelia tried, gently, to learn more. "Your parents must be proud of how smart you are," she ventured one day, setting down a bowl of chili that Sal had made extra meaty for him. Leo's face shuddered immediately. The light in his blue eyes dimmed, and he looked down at his bowl. "I don't have parents," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. The finality in his tone stopped Amelia cold. It wasn't the self-pitying whine of a child seeking sympathy. It was a statement of fact, as bleak and unadorned as the winter landscape outside. Amelia's heart broke for him all over again. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry," she said softly. He just shrugged, a small, heartbreakingly adult gesture of resignation, and began to eat his chili. She never asked about his parents again. The bond between them strengthened, forged in shared secrets and quiet companionship. For Amelia, Leo became more than just a hungry child she was helping. He was a focal point in her lonely existence. Her tiny apartment felt less empty because she spent her evenings wondering about him. Her draining job felt more meaningful because of the small act of rebellion she performed for him each day. He was, in a strange way, giving her as much as she was giving him. He was giving her a purpose beyond survival. Her own life was a precarious balance. The letters from the collection agency regarding her mother's medical debts were becoming more aggressive, their red ink warnings a stark reminder of the financial precipice she lived on. Every dollar she funneled into Leo's fund was a dollar she couldn't put toward that crushing weight. Some nights her own dinner was nothing more than toast and tea, the irony not lost on her. She was feeding a hungry boy while her own hunger, for security, for a future, for a life beyond this, gnawed at her. Brenda's surveillance also escalated. She started making surprise trips to the kitchen, trying to catch Sal in the act of plating extra food. She would accidentally clear booth 4 herself, hoping to find evidence of a free meal. Amelia and Sal had to become more creative, passing off food in takeaway bags with a nod and a wink, or Amelia paying for Leo's specials out of her own pocket when Brenda was watching, her tips for the day vanishing before she even had a chance to count them. "You're a fool, Amelia," Brenda hissed at her one day after watching her pay for Leo's grilled cheese. "You're letting that little grifter play you. People like that, they're parasites. They latch on and drain you dry." "He's a child, Brenda," Amelia shot back, her voice trembling with a rare display of anger. "He's hungry. The world is full of hungry people," Brenda retorted, her face a mask of scorn. "You can't save them all. You can barely save yourself." Brenda's words, cruel as they were, struck a nerve. Was she being a fool? Was her compassion just a naive weakness in a world that preyed on it? She looked over at booth 4, where Leo was meticulously cutting his grilled cheese sandwich into perfect squares. He caught her eye and gave her one of his small, shy smiles. And in that moment, Amelia knew she didn't care if it was foolish. That smile was worth more than the few dollars it cost her. It was a flicker of light in the gray gloom of Harmony Creek, and she would protect it for as long as she could. One particularly cold evening in December, as Leo was getting ready to leave, Amelia stopped him. The wind was howling outside, rattling the diner's windows. "Leo, wait," she said, her voice full of worry. She held out a thick, knitted scarf, a deep forest green. I found this. It was in the lost and found for ages. No one claimed it. You should have it." It was another lie. She had spent 2 weeks' worth of her meager Leo's fund on it at the town's only department store. It had been an extravagance she couldn't afford, but the thought of his thin neck exposed to the biting wind was one she couldn't bear. Leo stared at the scarf, his eyes wide. He reached out a hesitant hand and touched the soft wool. He looked from the scarf to her face, and his blue eyes were suddenly glistening with unshed tears. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. He just took the scarf and, with fumbling fingers, wrapped it around his neck. He pulled the end of it up to his nose, inhaling the scent of new wool. He pulled on his backpack, the Ghost S seeming to stand out against the blue canvas, and walked to the door. Before he pushed it open, he turned back, his small face serious, the green scarf a slash of vibrant color against his pale skin. "One day, Amelia," he said, his voice clear and steady, "I'm going to buy you that bakery." Then he was gone, vanished into the swirling snow and the encroaching darkness, leaving Amelia standing by the door, her heart swelling with a confusing mix of love, sorrow, and bewilderment. A bakery? How could he possibly know about her long-lost dream? She had never spoken of it to anyone at the diner. Not to Sal, not to the regulars, and certainly not to him. The mystery of the boy in booth 4 had just deepened, taking on a new, almost magical dimension. And as she locked the diner door that night, the jingle of the bells sounded less like a tired chime and more like the opening notes of a song whose ending she could not possibly imagine. The Thursday morning started like any other. The sun was a pale, watery disk behind a thick blanket of clouds. The air held the damp, metallic scent of impending snow. Inside the Harmony Creek diner, the rhythm was predictable. The coffee maker hissed and gurgled. Sal slapped bacon onto the hot griddle, the sizzle a familiar morning chorus. Amelia moved between tables, a pot of coffee in each hand, her movements economical and practiced, a dance she could perform in her sleep. Brenda was in a particularly foul mood, complaining about the cost of napkins and the way Amelia arranged the salt and pepper shakers. "They need to be perfectly aligned, Rosewood. Is that so difficult to understand? It's about presentation, professionalism." Amelia just murmured, "Sorry, Brenda," and adjusted the shakers, her mind already on Leo. He usually arrived around 10 after the morning rush had thinned out. She had saved him a large blueberry muffin from the morning batch, hiding it in a paper bag under the counter. At precisely 9:58 a.m., the tinny bell above the door jingled. Leo slipped in, a small shadow against the gray morning light. The green scarf she had given him was wrapped snugly around his neck. He gave her his customary small smile and slid into booth 4. Amelia felt the familiar warmth spread through her chest. Her day, despite Brenda's tirade, had officially begun. She was taking Mr. Abernathy's order, the usual, 2 eggs over easy, bacon, and rye toast, when a sound from outside sliced through the diner's calm ambiance. It wasn't the rumble of a passing semi-truck or the backfire of an old pickup. It was a low, powerful hum, the sound of expensive, finely tuned engines, and it was getting closer. Heads turned. The construction workers paused with forks halfway to their mouths. Sal leaned out from the kitchen window. Amelia glanced out the large front window, past the faded Daily Specials sign. 4 identical vehicles were pulling into the diner's cracked and weed-strewn parking lot. They were large black SUVs, the kind you saw in movies, with tinted windows so dark they looked like polished obsidian. They moved with a synchronized predatory grace, parking in a perfect diamond formation that effectively boxed in Amelia's Rust Bucket Festiva. They were immaculate, gleaming with a wealth that was utterly alien to Harmony Creek. They didn't just look out of place. They looked like they had landed from another planet. The diner fell silent. The only sounds were the buzz of the fluorescent lights and the frantic thumping of Amelia's own heart. Who were these people? Her mind raced through a Rolodex of fears. Was it the collection agency? Had they sent people to repossess? What? Her car was barely worth its weight in scrap metal. Was it the police? Was she in some kind of trouble she didn't even know about? Her secret with Leo suddenly felt heavy and dangerous. Had Brenda finally made good on her threats and reported her for something? She shot a terrified look at Brenda, but the manager looked as stunned and pale as everyone else. The doors of the 4 SUVs opened in unison. 8 men emerged, 4 drivers who remained by their vehicles, and 4 who began walking toward the diner. They were all tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in identical, impeccably tailored dark gray suits with earpieces discreetly tucked into their ears. They moved with a purpose that was both unnerving and mesmerizing. They were a wall of silent, intimidating professionalism. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. She felt rooted to the spot, the order pad heavy in her suddenly slick hand. Mr. Abernathy had lowered his newspaper, his mouth slightly agape. The man in the lead was older than the others, perhaps in his late 50s. He had silver hair, cut with military precision, and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. His expression was stern, impassive, but his eyes, sharp and intelligent, were scanning, assessing, missing nothing. He moved with an air of absolute authority. The diner door opened, but the bell didn't jingle. One of the men had held it, silencing it, a small act that felt like a profound violation of the diner's familiar world. The 4 men stepped inside, their expensive leather shoes making soft, purposeful sounds on the worn linoleum. The air crackled with tension. They didn't look at the stunned faces of the patrons. They didn't look at Amelia. Their gazes swept the room, methodical and searching. Amelia felt a primal wave of fear. They were looking for someone. Her eyes darted instinctively toward the back of the diner, to booth 4, and that's when she saw it. Leo was not looking at the men. He was looking at her. His face was devoid of color, his blue eyes wide with an emotion she couldn't decipher. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was something more complex. Resignation? Dread? He had pushed his plate away. His small hands were clenched into tight fists on the tabletop. He looked like a cornered animal, but an animal that had been expecting the hunters all along. The lead man's searching eyes finally settled on the back of the diner. They locked onto the small boy in the oversized hoodie and the bright green scarf. A flicker of something crossed the man's stern face. Relief, recognition, and a profound, almost reverent respect. The tension in the diner stretched to a breaking point. What was happening? Why were these formidable men, who looked like they protected presidents, focusing on a small, quiet boy? The silver-haired man began to walk toward the back, his movements slow and deliberate. The other 3 men fanned out, subtly, professionally, creating a perimeter. One stood by the door, another near the kitchen, the third near the restrooms. They weren't blocking anyone, but their presence was an invisible wall. No one was leaving. Amelia watched, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and terror. She took a half step forward, a protective instinct she couldn't suppress. The man nearest her without ever looking at her, simply raised a hand, a quiet, universally understood gesture to stay put. The leader stopped at booth 4. He stood there for a moment, just looking down at the boy. The entire diner held its breath. When he spoke, his voice was a low, resonant baritone, clear and formal, yet imbued with a deep, underlying emotion. It was what he said that shattered the reality of the Harmony Creek Diner into a million pieces. "Young Master Sterling," the man said, his voice echoing in the stunned silence, "it is over. We've found you. It's time to come home." Amelia's mind reeled. Young Master Sterling. The name meant nothing and everything. It was formal, aristocratic, a name from a different world. It was not the name of a poor, parentless boy. Leo finally looked up at the man. He didn't speak. He just gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. His gaze then shifted, finding Amelia's across the room. His eyes were pleading, desperate, and in them she saw the terrified child he truly was, a child her heart had recognized from the very beginning. The mystery of the boy in booth 4 was over. The mystery of young Master Sterling had just begun. The words "Young Master Sterling" hung in the air, thick and unbelievable. They ricocheted off the greasy spoon walls and the chipped coffee mugs, seeming to mock the very existence of the humble diner. The regulars exchanged bewildered glances. Mr. Abernathy's newspaper lay forgotten in his lap. Brenda stood frozen behind the cash register, her usual expression of sour authority replaced by one of slack-jawed astonishment. Amelia felt as though the floor had dropped out from under her. Sterling. The name tickled a remote corner of her memory, something she'd heard on a business news channel she glimpsed once while waiting at a bank. Sterling Corporation, a giant, a global conglomerate dealing in tech, in aerospace, in everything. It was a name associated with unimaginable wealth and power, a name that belonged in the glossy pages of Forbes, not whispered in the dreary confines of Harmony Creek. And the man had said it to Leo, her Leo, the boy who counted his pennies for a piece of toast, the boy she'd given a secondhand scarf to. The juxtaposition was so jarring, so utterly impossible, that her mind refused to process it. The silver-haired man, who Amelia now understood was not a threat, but a guardian, softened his expression. He pulled over a chair from an adjacent table and sat down, so he was at eye level with the boy. The gesture was one of respect, not intimidation. "Leonardo," he said, his voice gentler now, "I am James Harrison. I was your father's head of security. More than that, I was his friend." Leonardo, remained silent, his small jaw tight. He kept his eyes fixed on Amelia, a silent, desperate lifeline in a world that was suddenly tilting on its axis. Mr. Harrison followed his gaze and looked at Amelia for the first time. His eyes, sharp and analytical, took her in. The worn uniform, the cheap sneakers, the flour smudge on her cheek, the genuine terror and confusion on her face. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, an acknowledgement of her role in this bizarre tableau. He turned back to Leonardo. "Your parents, Robert and Catherine Sterling, loved you more than anything in this world," Harrison said, his voice low and steady, "for the boy's ears only, though in the dead silence of the diner, everyone could hear. Everything they did was to protect you, not just your body, but your spirit. They didn't want you to grow up in a gilded cage defined by a bank account. They wanted you to know the value of things, to understand the world, to have a normal life. As normal as possible." He paused, a flicker of pain crossing his stoic features. "Their death, it was a tragedy no one could have foreseen." He spoke of the private jet crash in the remote mountains of Colorado almost a year ago. A sudden, violent storm, no survivors. The news had been global, a story of immense wealth and sudden loss. Amelia vaguely remembered it now, the handsome, philanthropic couple on the screen. The reports had mentioned they were survived by a young son, but the family had been intensely private, and the boy was kept out of the media spotlight. "In their will," Harrison continued, "they left specific instructions. Your guardianship was to pass to a board of trustees, people they trusted implicitly until you came of age. I am the head of that board, but your father's cousin, Victor Sterling, used legal maneuvers, exploited loopholes. He contested the will. He argued that family should raise family. The courts unfortunately agreed to grant him temporary custody. Harrison's voice hardened, a dangerous edge creeping into his tone. Victor is not your father, Leonardo. He saw you not as a nephew to be cared for, but as a key, the key to the sterling fortune. While he couldn't touch the principle of your trust, he gained control of the substantial living allowances. He siphoned funds. He moved you to a secluded estate in upstate New York, and then he began to neglect you. The story tumbled out, a chilling narrative of greed and cruelty. Victor had provided the bare minimum. A tutor was fired. The household staff was replaced by a single, cruel governess. Leonardo was isolated, a prisoner in his own home, a ghost in the machine of his own inheritance. Victor's plan, Harrison explained, was insidious. He wanted to break the boy's spirit, to make him compliant, perhaps even to have him declared mentally unfit later on, giving Victor permanent control of the Sterling Empire. But he underestimated you, Harrison said, a note of pride in his voice. He underestimated your intelligence, and he underestimated your courage. You ran away 2 months ago. You knew something was wrong, and you took your life into your own hands. You took a bus, then another, living on the small amount of cash you managed to take, making your way across the country, trying to disappear. You were smart. You left no trail. Amelia stared at Leonardo. The quiet, withdrawn boy in booth 4 was a runaway, a fugitive from a life of gilded misery. His worn clothes weren't a sign of generational poverty, but a disguise. His silence wasn't just shyness. It was a survival mechanism. His surprising intelligence, his vocabulary, the way he understood complex financial talk, it all clicked into place. He wasn't just a smart kid. He was the heir to a dynasty, raised by brilliant parents before their lives were cut short. The Ghost S on his backpack, it was the Sterling Corporation logo. "We have been searching for you for 62 days, young master," Harrison said. "We used every resource at our disposal. Private investigators, cyber analysts, contacts all over the country. We finally got a break 3 days ago. A bus station ticket agent in a town 200 miles from here remembered a quiet boy paying in cash. The description was vague, but it was a start. We tracked the route, and the trail, faint as it was, led us to Harmony Creek." He gestured vaguely around the diner. "An investigator has been in town for 2 days observing. He saw you come in here yesterday. He saw kindness." Again, his eyes flickered to Amelia. "He reported that you seemed safe. We decided to approach this morning." Leonardo finally spoke. His voice, though quiet, was clear and cold. "Victor, is he—" "Victor Sterling was taken into federal custody an hour ago," Harrison stated, his voice clipped and final. "His assets have been frozen. The evidence of his fraud and criminal neglect is overwhelming. He will not be a problem for you ever again." A collective, quiet gasp went through the diner. This was a drama playing out on a scale they couldn't comprehend. A world of private jets, treacherous relatives, and federal agents. But Leonardo didn't look relieved. He looked trapped. He shook his head again, more forcefully this time. "No," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm not going." He slid out of the booth and, in a move that shocked everyone, he ran. He ran past the table, past the formidable Mr. Harrison, and straight to Amelia. He threw his small arms around her waist and buried his face in her apron, his body shaking with silent sobs. "I'm staying with Amelia," he choked out, his voice muffled by the fabric. "She's my friend. She's the only one who was ever nice to me, just because I was me." The entire bizarre, terrifying morning coalesced into that one heartbreaking moment. A billion-dollar heir, the subject of a nationwide search, was clinging to a small-town waitress, refusing to be rescued. Amelia stood frozen, her arms hovering uncertainly before settling on his trembling shoulders. She could feel his tears soaking through her uniform. In that moment, he wasn't young Master Sterling. He was just Leo, her Leo, frightened, alone, and clinging to the only stability he had known for months. Mr. Harrison rose slowly, his stern face etched with a complex mix of emotions: frustration, understanding, and a deep, weary sadness. The standoff in the Harmony Creek diner was not over. It had just found its true heart. The image of the small, shaking boy clinging to the waitress seemed to paralyze everyone in the room. The men in suits remained at their posts, their faces impassive, but a subtle tension radiated from them. They were professionals, trained for any contingency, but a crying 10-year-old who refused to cooperate with his own rescue was a tactical problem no amount of training could easily solve. Amelia's mind was a frantic, chaotic storm. She looked down at the top of Leonardo's head, his dark hair messy against her worn apron. She could feel the shuddering breaths he took. All her protective instincts, honed over the past few months, roared to life. Her first thought was a fierce, irrational, "They can't take him." But her second thought, crashing in right behind the first, was the stark reality of the situation. She looked past Leo to Mr. Harrison, whose granite-like face was softened by a look of profound empathy. This man wasn't the enemy. Victor was the enemy. This man, these men, they were the cavalry. They represented safety, justice, and a future for Leonardo that she could never provide. She couldn't protect him from the world, not really. She couldn't even afford to buy him lunch without risking her job. "Leonardo," Mr. Harrison said, his voice still calm, but with a new note of gentle urgency. "I understand. This woman," he nodded respectfully to Amelia, "has shown you a kindness you were denied. You are loyal to her. Your parents would have been proud of that loyalty. It's a sterling trait." He took a step closer. "But she cannot give you the life they wanted for you. She cannot give you the education you deserve, the opportunities you are owed, or the security you need. Your world is different now. We need to protect that world for you. We need to honor your parents' legacy." Leonardo just clung tighter to Amelia. "I don't want it," he mumbled into her apron. "I don't want the legacy. I want a grilled cheese. Amelia makes the best grilled cheese." The simple, childish statement was so poignant, it almost broke Amelia's heart. He wasn't rejecting a fortune. He was clinging to a simple, tangible act of love. He was choosing the warmth of a diner booth over the cold reality of a boardroom. Amelia knew, with a certainty that was both painful and clear, what she had to do. This was the final and most important kindness she could offer him. She had to let him go. She gently pried his arms from her waist and knelt down, so she was looking directly into his tear-streaked face. She took his small hands in hers. They felt so fragile. "Leo," she said, her voice thick with emotion, but steady. She chose the name he had shared with her, the name of their secret world. "Listen to me. Mr. Harrison is right." His face crumpled. "No! You too?" The betrayal in his eyes was a physical blow. "No, honey, never," she said quickly, squeezing his hands. "I will always be on your side. And that's why you have to listen. For the last few months, this place, our secret, it was our safe bubble, right?" He nodded, sniffing. "It was safe because no one knew who you were. But the bubble just burst, Leo. The whole world knows who you are now. And some parts of the world aren't very nice. You need people like Mr. Harrison to keep you safe from those parts." She wiped a tear from his cheek with her thumb. "Think about what he said. Your parents. They sounded like amazing people. They didn't want you to be spoiled. They wanted you to be good. That's why you are the way you are. You're kind and smart and brave. Running away like you did? That was the bravest thing I've ever heard." "I was scared," he whispered. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," she told him, echoing a sentiment her own mother had told her years ago. "It means you do what's right, even when you're scared. And the right thing to do now is to go with Mr. Harrison. Let him help you. Let him help you become the man your parents wanted you to be." He was wavering, his little body torn between his fear of the unknown and his trust in her. "But I'll never see you again," he said, his lip trembling. The words pierced her. The thought of her world without his quiet presence in booth 4 was a bleak and empty prospect. The diner would just be a job again. Her life would go back to being a loop of exhaustion and unpaid bills. But this wasn't about her. "That," she said with a conviction she didn't entirely feel, "is not true." She looked up at Mr. Harrison, a challenge in her eyes. Right? Harrison met her gaze and understood immediately. Absolutely not true, he affirmed, his voice resonating with sincerity. Amelia Rosewood will have a direct line to you, Leonardo, whenever she wishes to speak to you, and she will be welcome to visit you, as our guest, anytime she likes. You have my word. The word of a sterling employee is a bond. Amelia turned back to Leo. See? A promise. And remember what you told me? She asked, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. About the bakery? A tiny flicker of his earlier determination returned to his eyes. He nodded. Well, she said, managing a wobbly smile, you can't buy me a bakery if you're stuck here in Harmony Creek, can you? You have to go out there and learn how to run the Sterling Corporation so you can afford it. It was a silly, desperate gambit, connecting his grand destiny to her long-lost dream, but it worked. It framed his departure not as an ending, but as the beginning of a shared quest. A hint of a smile touched his lips. It will be the best bakery in the world, he stated, his voice regaining some of its strength, with blueberry muffins every day. I wouldn't have it any other way, she said, her own tears finally spilling over. She pulled him into a fierce hug, breathing in the scent of him one last time, a mix of winter air, wool from the scarf, and the faint, sweet smell of the muffin he never got to eat. Be good, Leo, she whispered in his ear, but don't let them change the best parts of you. I won't, he promised. He pulled back, his decision made. He looked small and terribly vulnerable, but the terrified look in his eyes had been replaced by a quiet resolve. He turned and walked to Mr. Harrison, taking the man's outstretched hand. As they walked toward the door, Leonardo stopped and turned back one last time. He looked at Amelia, and then his gaze swept over the other faces in the diner. Mr. Abernathy, the construction workers, even a stunned-looking Sal who had emerged from the kitchen. Thank you, Leonardo said, his voice clear and carrying through the room. All of you, for being quiet. It was a strange, adult thing to say, but everyone understood. He was thanking them for giving him a sanctuary, for allowing him his anonymity, for not questioning the strange boy in the corner. He was thanking them for the gift of being invisible when he needed it most. Then he and Mr. Harrison walked out the door, followed by the other two men. The diner was silent for a beat, and then the powerful hum of the SUV engine started up. Through the window, Amelia watched as the 4 black vehicles pulled out of the parking lot with the same quiet, synchronized precision with which they had arrived. They turned onto the highway and accelerated, disappearing into the gray morning, taking a piece of her heart with them. The spell was broken. The diner erupted in a low murmur of voices. Mr. Abernathy finally picked up his paper, though he just stared at it, unseeing. Brenda, looking pale and shaken, slowly sank onto a stool behind the counter. Amelia remained kneeling on the floor, the spot where Leo had clung to her still feeling warm. Her shift wasn't over. There were tables to be cleared, coffee to be poured, and the mundane reality of her life to attend to. But she knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing would ever be the same again. The secret of Booth 4 was out, and it had changed the world, or at least her small corner of it, forever. The days following the departure of the black SUVs were strange and hollow. The Harmony Creek diner returned to its normal rhythm, but it was a rhythm with a missing beat. Booth 4 remained stubbornly empty, a silent memorial that no one dared to occupy. The regulars treated Amelia with a new, hushed reverence, while Brenda, for the first time, was rendered speechless, haunted by the knowledge that she had nearly fired a waitress for being kind to one of the richest children in the world. For Amelia, the emptiness was a profound ache. Her job, once imbued with a secret purpose, was just a job again. The weariness returned, heavier than before, and the dream of a bakery felt more foolish than ever. She had encouraged Leo to embrace his destiny, but hers seemed destined to remain an endless cycle of greasy plates and aching feet. Exactly 1 week later, a sleek black town car, less intimidating than the SUVs, but just as out of place, pulled into the parking lot. A woman in a sharp business suit, introducing herself as Eleanor Vance, an attorney for the Sterling Corporation, entered and asked for Amelia. She led a bewildered Amelia to the now sacred Booth 4. Ms. Rosewood, the lawyer began. Leonardo Sterling has been very clear about his wishes. First, he asked me to give you this. She slid a small envelope across the table. Inside was a card with a child's careful handwriting. For the muffins, and the scarf, and for being my friend. I'm keeping my promise. Leo. Tucked behind it was a check. Amelia's breath hitched. The number written on the check was $250,000. The memo line read, "For the Rosewood Bakery." It was a figure so vast it seemed unreal. It was freedom. It was the end of her mother's crushing debt. It was her dream, handed to her on a piece of paper. Tears of shock and gratitude streamed down her face. Leonardo was very insistent on that, Ms. Vance said with a small smile. But that is a personal gift. It is not the primary reason I am here. She pushed a thicker document across the table. The Sterling Corporation has a more formal proposal. Ms. Vance explained that Leo's parents, Robert and Catherine Sterling, had been developing a new branch of their philanthropic foundation before they died. It was to be a division focused on micro-impact grants, small, direct funds to help individuals and communities bypass bureaucracy, a fund to pay a single mother's heating bill or repair a town's only playground. When Mr. Harrison told Leonardo about this, Ms. Vance continued, her expression earnest, Leonardo made his first official decision as the primary heir. He insisted the division be established immediately, and he insisted that there was only one person he wanted to run it. She tapped the contract. He wants you, Ms. Rosewood. He told the board, and I quote, Amelia knows how to help people. She doesn't need a committee. She just sees who is hungry and feeds them. Amelia stared, speechless. Her, a waitress, to run a global foundation's new division? I don't have any experience, she stammered. I have no qualifications. Your qualifications, Miss Vance said gently, are your compassion and your integrity. According to Leonardo, they are the only ones that matter. You would have a full support staff, of course. You would provide the direction, the heart. The position is based in New York, to be near Leonardo. He has made that a non-negotiable part of his cooperation. Amelia's head was spinning. New York, a new life, a new purpose. It was terrifying and exhilarating. She looked around the familiar, shabby diner that had been both her prison and her sanctuary. It was where she had met the boy who changed everything. This was her chance to do for countless others what she had done for him, to offer a hand to someone who needed it, no questions asked. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face. When, she asked, her voice clear and steady. Do I start? 2 weeks later, Amelia served her last cup of coffee. After saying her goodbyes, she packed her few belongings into a new car provided by the corporation. Her last stop was the empty diner parking lot where her rusty Festiva once sat. She was leaving a life of quiet desperation for one of profound purpose. She was no longer just a waitress. She was on her way to New York to run the Leo's Lamp division of the Sterling Foundation, the name a tribute to the light he had been for her and she for him. She had a bakery to plan and a world to help. That's the incredible story of Amelia Rosewood and the quiet boy who turned out to be anything but ordinary. It's a powerful reminder that you never know the impact a simple act of kindness can have. A plate of pancakes, a warm scarf, a moment of compassion. These small gestures can ripple outward, changing not just one life, but many. Amelia thought she was just feeding a hungry child, but she was nurturing a future, and in doing so, she discovered her own. Her story proves that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the connections we make and the love we choose to share, no matter the personal cost. If this story touched your heart, please help our channel grow by giving this video a like and sharing it with someone who might need a reminder of the power of kindness. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next real-life story. Thank you for listening.